The radio crackled with static, then silence. Command repeated the call sign 3 times before Lieutenant General Marcus Harwell pressed his palm flat against the operations table, his jaw tightening in that particular way that made junior officers flinch. Viper 79er, respond. Nothing. The digital map showed her last known position as a pulsing red dot over hostile territory, 16 miles beyond the forward line. An SA-15 battery had lit up the grid square 4 minutes ago. Intelligence confirmed the launch. Satellite imagery showed smoke rising from a canyon where no smoke should be. Harwell exhaled through his nose and made the call every commander dreads. He declared Captain Kestrel Navin's A-10 Thunderbolt II officially downed. Her status changed from active to missing in action. The room absorbed the words like a gut punch. Some pilots flew with flair, others with precision. Navin flew with something else, something that made grown men in air-conditioned command centers feel inadequate when they watched her gun camera footage. She never hot-dogged, never wasted ordnance, never left anyone behind. Her call sign, Viper 79er, had become shorthand among ground units for close air support you can bet your life on. And now she was gone. The bureaucracy moved quickly. Notifications drafted. Next of kin identified. Memorial preparations initiated. Harwell knew the routine too well. He had written too many of these letters, each one carving another hollow space behind his ribs. 47 minutes later, an Army forward observer named Corporal Denny Ordega was scanning the southern ridgeline through thermal optics when something caught his eye. He adjusted the focus, his breath catching. Rattler 6, this is Op Hawk 3. You're gonna want to see this." His platoon commander climbed up beside him, took the optics, and went very still. Against the burnt orange sky, a dark shape was moving, low, impossibly low, following the terrain with the kind of intimacy that only comes from desperation or mastery. It was an A-10, but something was wrong. The aircraft's silhouette looked incomplete, like someone had taken an eraser to the top half. As it passed over a patch of desert scrub, the setting sun caught the exposed interior where the canopy should have been. The cockpit was open to the sky. Wind screamed through the gutted frame at 250 knots. The pilot inside, small, helmeted, harnessed tight, sat upright with one hand on the stick and the other working the throttle. No ejection, no bailout, just raw, defiant flight. Ortega keyed his radio with shaking fingers. All stations, Viper 79er is inbound. Repeat, Viper 79er is flying." The net exploded with voices, questions, disbelief. At Kandahar Air Base, Harwell froze mid-signature on the casualty report. His pen hovered above the paper. Someone turned up the speaker volume. Through the static and overlapping transmissions, one voice cut through with eerie calm. "Tower, Viper 79er requesting straighten approach, runway 21. Aircraft is combat damaged. Canopy is gone. Hydraulics are marginal. I have one engine at 60%. Rolling in from the south." The voice belonged to Kestrel Navin. She sounded like she was ordering coffee. The tower controller, a 22-year-old senior airman named Luca Voss, had trained for hundreds of scenarios. This was not one of them. His hand trembled as he keyed the mic. "Viper 79er, say again your status. Did you say canopy is gone?" A pause. Wind howled in the background of her transmission, a sound like the earth itself screaming. "Affirmative, tower. Canopy departed the aircraft following a proximity detonation. I have full elevator control, partial aileron, minimal rudder. Flight instruments are operational. I can make the runway." Voss looked to his supervisor, who looked to the operations officer, who was already sprinting toward the command post. The whole base was waking up to what was happening. Maintenance crews stopped mid-task. Security forces turned toward the southern sky. Pilots tumbled out of the ready room, shielding their eyes against the setting sun. Someone grabbed binoculars. Someone else grabbed a camera. The A-10 appeared first as a shimmer against the darkening horizon, then as a shape, then as an unmistakable outline. That brutish, beautiful, utterly ungraceful machine that had saved more lives than any artist's masterpiece. But this one looked like it had flown through hell's own fireplace. Scorched titanium bathtub, shredded tail section. And that gaping wound where the canopy used to be, exposing Navin to 300 knots of ram air, freezing temperatures at altitude, and enough wind blast to rip an unprotected human apart. Yet she flew, gear down, flaps extended, lined up on final approach like she was bringing home a Sunday training sortie. Harwell reached the flight line just as the A-10's wheels kissed the runway with a puff of rubber smoke. The landing was textbook, smooth, controlled, professional. The aircraft rolled out, slowed, turned onto the taxiway. Emergency vehicles followed at a respectful distance, their lights painting the twilight in urgent reds and whites. When the jet finally stopped on the ramp, the engine spooling down with that distinctive whine, the gathered crowd fell silent. No one cheered. No one moved. They just watched as Captain Kestrel Navin unstrapped, stood slowly in the exposed cockpit, and climbed down the ladder with the careful deliberation of someone who had just spent 90 minutes fighting physics, fear, and probability. Her flight suit was torn. Her face was wind-burned, streaked with hydraulic fluid and soot. Her dark hair, usually tied back in a regulation bun, whipped free in the evening breeze. She pulled off her helmet, tucked it under one arm, and walked across the tarmac with her eyes fixed on some middle distance only she could see. The base commander approached, but Harwell got there first. He stopped 3 feet away, studying her with an expression that was part relief, part disbelief, part something else entirely. "Captain Navin," he said quietly. "Sir," she replied. Her voice was hoarse, raw from screaming over the wind. "You were declared downed." "I know, sir. I heard the traffic." "How?" It was the only word he could manage. "How did you survive the missile? How did you fly without a canopy? How did you not freeze, not suffocate, not lose consciousness? How are you standing here?" Navin's jaw tightened. For a moment something flickered behind her eyes, something ancient and hard and utterly unyielding. "I had people on the ground, sir. They needed me to come home." It was the most inadequate explanation and the only one that mattered. Harwell nodded slowly. Behind him, the gathered personnel remained silent, bearing witness to something they would tell their grandchildren about. This was the moment, though none of them knew it yet, when Captain Kestrel Navin stopped being just another pilot and became something else. A story, a legend, a symbol of what the human will could accomplish when everything else failed. But that would come later. Right now, she was just a woman who had flown a broken machine through impossible conditions because the alternative was unthinkable. The medical team moved in, but she waved them off. "I'm fine. Need to debrief while it's fresh." "Captain," the flight surgeon began. "I'm fine," she repeated, and the steel in her voice made it clear the discussion was over. Harwell made a decision. "Conference room, 30 minutes. I want everything." She nodded and walked toward the operations building, her steps steady despite the exhaustion that must have been dragging at her bones. Behind her, the shattered A-10 sat on the ramp like a monument to defiance, its empty cockpit gaping at the stars beginning to emerge overhead. Someone would photograph it. Someone would file a report. Someone would recommend her for a medal. But none of that captured what had actually happened up there, in the thin, cold air above the hostile desert, when Kestrel Navin made the choice to fly home instead of punch out. The debriefing room smelled like stale coffee and recycled air. Harwell sat at the head of the table, flanked by the wing commander, the intelligence officer, and a quiet woman from some agency that didn't advertise its acronym. Navin sat across from them, a bottle of water in front of her, untouched. She had refused the offered chair with a backrest, choosing instead a simple metal folding seat. Sitting up straight seemed important to her. Harwell opened a notebook, clicked his pen. "Walk me through it." From push time. Navin's eyes focused on a point somewhere beyond the wall. Push from Kandahar at 14:30 local. Flight of 2, me and Captain Rourke in Viper 80. Mission was armed reconnaissance along the Helmand corridor. Intel had reported possible enemy movement near grid Papa Quebec 73. We split the search area. I took south, Rourke took north. Her voice was clinical, detached, the way pilots talk when they are building a wall between themselves and what they have survived. 15:07, I received a troops in contact call from Badger 26, an Army patrol that had triggered an ambush. 4 vehicles, approximately 20 dismounts, heavy machine gun fire from a tree line. I rolled in from the west, made positive ID on the enemy position, cleared hot. She paused, took a breath. First gun run was effective. 30 mm. Suppressed the tree line. Badger 2-6 reported enemy breaking contact. I repositioned for a second pass to ensure they stayed suppressed. That's when the SA-15 launched. The intelligence officer leaned forward. You had no warning, no radar spike. Negative. They were emission silent until the moment of launch. Smart, patient. They waited until I was committed to the gun run, nose down, slow and vulnerable. Harwell's pen stopped moving. Every pilot's nightmare, low, slow, focused on the ground, and something reaches up from the earth to swat you out of the sky. I saw the smoke trail. Estimated time to impact was 4 seconds. I punched flares, broke hard left, full afterburner. Her fingers twitched slightly, muscle memory of the stick yanking in her hand. Missile went for the flares. Proximity fuse detonated 20 meters behind the aircraft. Shrapnel penetrated the tail section and the canopy. The canopy didn't shatter, it separated. The whole assembly just peeled off. 1 second it was there, the next I was breathing outside air at 4,000 feet. The flight surgeon who had insisted on being present made a note. At that altitude, you would have experienced immediate hypoxia risk, rapid decompression, wind blast trauma. I'm aware, Navin said quietly. I went to the same school you did. Harwell raised a hand. Continue, Captain. Initial assessment, aircraft was flyable, engines were good, flight controls sluggish but responsive. I had altitude and airspeed. Options were to eject or attempt to recover the aircraft. She looked directly at Harwell. Sir, I had ground forces in contact. If I ejected, they would have lost their only air support. The nearest CAS asset was 30 minutes out. Badger 2-6 had wounded. They needed me. The room absorbed this. The choice she had made in the span of a heartbeat, while wind screamed through her cockpit and alarms shrieked in her headset. Stay with a dying machine or save yourself. She had chosen the machine because it meant saving others. I descended to 2,000 feet to reduce the wind blast and made another gun run, suppressed the enemy position. Badger 2-6 confirmed they were extracting their wounded. I stayed overhead until they were clear, then turned for home. The intelligence officer blinked. You made another gun run with no canopy. Yes, ma'am. At 2,000 feet. Yes, ma'am. While taking ground fire. Navin's expression did not change. They were shooting at the aircraft, not me. I was just along for the ride. It might have been a joke. No one laughed. Harwell set down his pen. Captain, you flew 90 minutes in an open cockpit. The temperature at altitude is minus 30 Celsius. The wind speed at 250 knots is enough to cause severe facial trauma. How did you manage it? For the first time, something like emotion crossed Navin's face. I put my visor down, sir, tucked my chin, focused on instruments. The aircraft wanted to fly. I just kept it pointed in the right direction. It was an absurd understatement, and everyone in the room knew it. The wing commander, a silver-haired colonel named Pappas who had flown F-16s in the Gulf War, shook his head slowly. Captain, I have 28 years in the cockpit. I have never heard of anyone attempting what you did. The survival rate for open cockpit flight at those speeds is effectively zero. Navin met his eyes. Then I guess I'm the exception, sir. There was no arrogance in her voice, just fact. Harwell glanced at the agency woman, who gave a slight nod. Classified matters, evidently, could wait. He closed his notebook. Captain Navin, you are grounded pending a full investigation and medical evaluation. That's not punitive, it's protocol. You understand? Yes, sir. You'll be awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross at minimum, probably more. You saved lives today, both on the ground and in the air. That won't be forgot. She nodded but said nothing. Medals were not why she flew. Harwell stood. Get some rest. That's an order. Navin rose, saluted, and walked out. The door closed behind her with a soft click. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Pappas exhaled. I need to see the gun camera footage. Already queued up, the intelligence officer said, reaching for a laptop. The screen flickered to life. Black and white thermal imagery. The HUD displayed airspeed, altitude, weapon status. The video began with a routine gun run, crosshairs tracking a tree line, the pipper settling, the trigger squeeze, the camera shuddering as the GAU-8 Avenger cannon roared to life. 30mm rounds chewed through the earth at 65 per second. Then the screen flashed white. Static. When the image returned, the perspective had changed. The camera was shaking, the HUD flickering, altitude was dropping, airspeed was erratic, and in the top right corner of the frame where the canopy rail should have been, there was only sky. The next clip showed the second gun run. The aircraft was lower now, the target closer. The Pipper tracked smoothly despite the impossible conditions in the cockpit. The gun fired. The enemy position disintegrated. The aircraft pulled up, banked right, and climbed toward the mountains. Pappas replayed it 3 times. Then he closed the laptop and looked at Harwell. "Sir, I don't know what we're supposed to do with this." Harwell knew what he meant. Acts of heroism were common enough in war. Acts of the impossible were something else. They disrupted the comfortable narratives of what could and could not be done. They made people uncomfortable. They raised questions about who we celebrate and why. And they forced commanders to confront the fact that sometimes the most extraordinary warriors were the ones who had been overlooked, underestimated, or simply never given the chance to prove what they could do. Kestrel Navin had been all 3. She had graduated from the Air Force Academy in the middle of her class. No honors, no fanfare. She had been assigned to the A-10 community because she requested it, and most ambitious fighter pilots did not request the A-10. It was slow, ugly, unglamorous. It would never break the sound barrier or dance with enemy fighters in the stratosphere. It was a close air support platform, a mud mover, a grunt's best friend. It was also brutally effective, and flying it well required a particular kind of mind, patient, precise, and utterly calm under fire. Navin had all of that, but she also had something else, something harder to define. The ground units called it the Navin effect. When she was overhead, they felt safer, not because she dropped more bombs or fired more rounds, but because she saw the battlefield differently. She anticipated threats before they materialized. She positioned herself where she would be needed before anyone called for help. She flew like she could read the enemy's mind. Some pilots thought she was reckless. Others thought she was lucky. Harwell was beginning to think she was neither. She was simply better than anyone wanted to admit. Next morning, the story leaked. Not through official channels, those were locked down tight, but through the ground units. Badger 26 had a soldier with a smartphone and a grudge against anyone who said women couldn't handle combat. He posted 3 sentences on a military forum. Viper 79er saved our asses yesterday. Flew without a canopy for 90 minutes. If you say female pilots can't hack it, I'll find you. The internet did what the internet does. The story spread, mutated, grew. By noon, there were threads on Reddit, Twitter, and a dozen military blogs. By evening, a journalist from Defense News had called the Public Affairs office. By the following morning, the story had gone viral. Most of the coverage was respectful, even reverent. But there were detractors, armchair experts who questioned the details, keyboard warriors who insisted the story was exaggerated, and a certain subset of voices, always anonymous, always angry, who simply could not accept that the pilot in question was a woman. Harwell read the comments and felt something hot and dangerous bloom in his chest. He had spent 30 years in the Air Force. He had flown combat missions in 3 wars. He had commanded squadrons, wings, entire operations. And he had never, not once, seen anything like what Kestrel Navin had done. Yet here were people who had never sat in a cockpit, never heard a missile warning, never felt the stick shake in their hands as a machine disintegrated around them, and they were calling her a liar. He picked up his phone and called the public affairs chief. "I want a press conference. Tomorrow. I want Captain Navin standing next to the aircraft. And I want every camera in theater pointed at that wreck when I tell them what happened." The press conference was held on the flight line at 0900. The sky was a hard, bright blue, the kind of blue that makes you squint and remember that the world is bigger than any of us. The damaged A-10 sat behind the podium, exactly as it had been when Navin landed it, canopy gone, tail shredded, scorch marks painting the fuselage in abstract patterns. Maintenance had not touched it. This was evidence. Testimony in metal and carbon fiber. Harwell stood at the podium, Navin to his right. She wore a fresh flight suit, her hair pulled back, her face expressionless. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. Harwell did not care. She was going to stand there and be recognized whether she liked it or not. The reporters filled the space in front of the podium, military journalists, network correspondents, freelancers with cameras and notebooks. Harwell waited until they settled. 2 days ago, Captain Kestrel Navin was providing close air support to a ground unit under fire. She was engaged by a surface-to-air missile. The missile's proximity fuse detonated near her aircraft, causing catastrophic damage and ejecting the canopy. Most pilots would have ejected. Captain Navin did not. She remained with the aircraft, continued the mission, and flew 90 minutes back to base in an open cockpit at speeds exceeding 200 knots. She saved the lives of soldiers on the ground. She saved a multi-million-dollar aircraft, and she did it with a level of skill and courage that defies easy description. He paused, let that sink in. I'm not here to tell you this was smart. It wasn't. It was insane, but it was also necessary, and it worked. Captain Navin will not be taking questions today. I will. Let's begin. Questions came fast. How did she survive the wind? How did she maintain control? Was she trained for this? Harwell answered each one with clinical precision, never embellishing, never underselling. Just the facts, brutal and inescapable. When a reporter asked if Navin's gender had anything to do with the story's virality, Harwell's eyes went cold. Captain Navin's gender is irrelevant. Her skill is not. Her courage is not. If you want to write a story about gender, write it somewhere else. Here we measure people by what they do, not what they are. The reporter flinched but nodded. Another raised a hand. General, there are people online questioning whether this actually happened. Harwell smiled, and it was not a kind smile. The aircraft is behind me. The gun camera footage is available for review. The ground unit Captain Navin supported has provided sworn statements. If someone wants to call them liars, they're welcome to do it to their faces. I'll provide the travel arrangements. That ended the skepticism. The press conference wrapped 20 minutes later. As the reporters dispersed, a young captain from public affairs approached Harwell. Sir, we're getting requests for interviews with Captain Navin. Dozens. Some are offering significant. Denied, Harwell said flatly. All of them. Sir, this could be a significant public relations opportunity. Harwell turned to look at the captain. Son, Captain Navin is not a public relations opportunity. She's a combat pilot. She has a job to do, and turning her into a celebrity is not part of that job. If the media wants a story, they have one. If they want a hero, they can look at the damn airplane. Understood? Yes, sir. Navin had already walked away. Harwell found her 20 minutes later in the squadron-ready room, sitting alone with a cup of coffee and a maintenance logbook. She did not look up when he entered. You did well up there, he said. I didn't say anything, sir. Exactly. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. How are you holding up? She closed the logbook. I'm fine. That's the second time you've said that. I'm starting not to believe you. Navin's jaw tightened. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. I didn't do this for medals or press conferences or whatever the hell this is turning into. I did it because it was the mission, that's all. And now people are acting like I'm some kind of, I don't know, symbol. I'm not. I'm just a pilot who got lucky. Harwell leaned back. You think it was luck? I think if that missile had been 3 meters closer, I'd be dead. So yeah, luck. Luck is part of it, Harwell admitted. But luck doesn't fly a crippled aircraft for 90 minutes. Luck doesn't make a second gun run with no canopy. That was skill, Captain, and more than that, it was character. Whether you like it or not, people are going to look at what you did and see something worth aspiring to. You don't get to control that. Navin looked at him, and for the first time, he saw the exhaustion behind her eyes. I just want to fly, sir. I know, and you will. But first, you're going to let the flight surgeon clear you, and you're going to take a week of leave, and you're going to process what happened. That's not optional. She nodded slowly. Harwell stood. For what it's worth, Captain, I've been doing this a long time. I've seen a lot of brave people do a lot of brave things. What you did ranks among the best of them. 3 days later, Navin was sitting in a nondescript office in the base hospital, answering questions for a psychiatrist who kept asking how she felt. She hated these sessions. Feelings were irrelevant. Feelings did not keep you alive in the cockpit. Training did. Discipline did. Focus did. But the Air Force had rules, and one of those rules was that anyone who survived a near-death experience had to talk to someone with a degree in listening. Tell me about the moment the canopy came off, the psychiatrist said. Her name was Major Akoy, and she had kind eyes that made Naveen instinctively distrust her. Naveen stared at the wall. It was loud, then it was quiet, then it was loud again. Can you elaborate? The explosion was loud. The canopy detaching was quiet, just a sort of click and a rush of air. Then the wind noise was loud, constant, like being inside a hurricane. What did you think in that moment? I thought I needed to assess the damage and decide whether to eject. And you decided not to. Yes. Why? Naveen exhaled. Because I had a mission. People on the ground needed me. If I ejected, they'd be on their own. So you prioritized their lives over your own. I prioritized the mission. Akoy made a note. Do you think that's healthy? Naveen's eyes snapped to hers. Healthy? I'm a combat pilot, Major. My job is to put myself between the enemy and my people. If that's not healthy, then you're talking to the wrong person. You should be asking whether I'm effective. And I am. Akoy set down her pen. Captain, no one is questioning your effectiveness, but I need to make sure you're processing the trauma of what happened. I'm fine. You keep saying that, because it's true. They stared at each other. Finally, Akoy sighed. Let me try a different approach. What scares you, Captain Naveen? The question caught her off guard. Excuse me, what scares you? Everyone is afraid of something, even pilots. Naveen considered lying. Then she considered saying nothing. Then she considered the truth, which was more complicated than Akoy probably wanted. Failing, she said finally. Letting people down. Being in a position to help and not being good enough to make a difference. That scares me. And death. Death is just an outcome. You can't be afraid of outcomes. You can only control inputs. Akoy smiled faintly. You sound like an engineer. I am an engineer. I have a degree in aerospace engineering. Flying is applied physics. Fear is a distraction. Fear is also a survival mechanism. Not in the cockpit. In the cockpit, fear gets you killed. Respect for the danger, yes. Awareness of the risks, absolutely, but fear makes you hesitate. Hesitation makes you slow. Slow makes you dead. Akoy leaned back. Captain, I'm going to clear you for flight duty, but I want you to promise me something. What? If you ever stop being fine, you'll come back and talk to me. No bullshit, no brave face, just honesty. Naveen met her eyes. I can do that. Good, you're dismissed. Naveen stood, saluted, and walked out. She did not feel relief. She felt nothing, which was exactly how she preferred it. Feelings were for later. Right now, she had a job to do. The following week, Naveen returned to flight status. Her first sortie was a simple reconnaissance mission. Low stakes, minimal risk, the kind of thing they gave pilots returning from medical leave. She flew it perfectly as expected and returned to base with nothing to report. The second sortie was close air support for a Marine unit near Sangin, textbook mission. She dropped 2 GBU-12s on a fortified position and was back on the ground in 3 hours. No drama, no headlines. Exactly how she liked it, but something had changed. The other pilots treated her differently now. Not with hostility, never that. The A-10 community was too tight-knit for that kind of nonsense. But there was a new weight to the way they looked at her, a certain deference that had not been there before. In the squadron briefing room, when she offered a tactical opinion, people listened in a way they had not before. When she walked into the chow hall, conversations paused. Not out of disrespect, but out of something else. Awe maybe, or fear. It made her uncomfortable. She had never wanted to be special. She had wanted to be competent, reliable, effective. She had wanted to be the pilot you called when you needed the job done right. Now she was something else. A story, a symbol, a legend in the making. And legends, she knew, were fragile things. They could be built up and torn down with equal speed. One mistake, one bad call, one moment of hesitation, and the narrative would shift. She would go from hero to cautionary tale. So she flew carefully, precisely, flawlessly. She gave them no reason to doubt, no reason to whisper, no reason to question. And slowly, grudgingly, she began to accept that this was her life now. 2 months after the incident, Harwell was summoned to a meeting at Bagram. The subject line of the email was vague: personnel matter, immediate attention required. He arrived to find a conference room filled with people he did not recognize. Pentagon types, policymakers, someone from the Secretary of Defense's office. A woman in civilian clothes who introduced herself as Dr. Elaine Sorensen, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs. She smiled like a shark. "General Harwell, thank you for coming. We wanted to discuss Captain Naveen." Harwell's expression did not change. "What about her?" "She's become something of a phenomenon. Social media, news coverage, even a few congressional inquiries. People are very interested in her story." "Her story is classified." "Parts of it, yes, but the broad strokes are public, and the public loves it. A female pilot, an impossible feat of flying, a dramatic rescue. It's the kind of narrative we can build on." Harwell's eyes narrowed. "Build on." Sorensen leaned forward. "General, the Air Force has a recruiting problem. Enlistments are down, public approval is down. We need good stories. Captain Naveen is a very good story." "She's not a story, she's a pilot." "She's both, and we'd like to leverage that. Media tour, speaking engagements, recruitment campaigns. She'd be the face of—" "No." The room went quiet. Sorensen blinked. "Excuse me." "No, Captain Naveen is a combat pilot. She's deployed in a combat zone. Her job is to fly missions and support ground forces. She is not a recruitment tool. She is not a public relations asset. She's a warfighter, and you will leave her alone." Sorensen's smile hardened. "General, with all due respect, this is not your decision. Captain Naveen is a member of the United States Air Force. The Air Force has needs that go beyond individual preferences." Harwell stood. "Dr. Sorensen, with all due respect, you don't know a damn thing about what Captain Naveen has done or what she continues to do. You see a headline. I see a pilot who put her life on the line so that soldiers could go home to their families. You want to turn her into a poster, fine, but you'll do it over my objection, and I'll make sure everyone from the Chief of Staff down knows exactly how I feel about it." He walked out. The door closed with a definitive thud. Sorensen stared after him, then looked at the others. "Well, that went poorly." A colonel from Manpower cleared his throat. "Ma'am, for what it's worth, Harwell's right. Pulling Naveen out of theater for PR work would be a mistake. She's too valuable where she is." "Valuable how?" "The ground units trust her. Other pilots respect her. She's a stabilizing force. You take her out of the cockpit, you lose that. And in exchange, you get what? A few news cycles, some feel-good segments. It's not worth it." Sorensen tapped her pen against her notepad. "What if we make it voluntary, offer her the opportunity? She'll say no." "How do you know?" The colonel smiled faintly. "Because I've read her file. She doesn't care about recognition. She cares about the mission. Offer her a medal, she'll take it and put it in a drawer. Offer her a media tour, she'll tell you to go to hell. Respectfully, of course." In the end, they left Naveen alone. Not out of respect for her wishes, but because Harwell made it politically costly to do otherwise. He called in favors, leaned on connections, and made it clear that if they pulled Naveen from the cockpit, he would make noise. Loud, public, career-damaging noise. The Pentagon decided it was not worth the fight. Naveen never knew any of this. She was too busy flying. Over the next 6 months, she logged 140 combat missions. She became the go-to pilot for high-risk close air support. When a unit was in trouble, when the situation was desperate, when no one else wanted the mission, they called Viper 79er. She never said no. One mission stood out. A special forces team had been pinned down in a valley near the Pakistani border. Heavy machine gun fire from 3 directions. No cover, casualties mounting. The weather was bad, low clouds, poor visibility, high winds. Every other aircraft in the area had declined the mission. Too dangerous, too many unknowns. Naveen took it. She flew into the valley at 500 feet below the cloud deck, with terrain on both sides and tracers lighting up the sky. She made 4 gun runs, each one threading between mountains and enemy fire, each one buying the team on the ground a few more seconds to move, to breathe, to survive. When she finally pulled off target, the Special Forces commander keyed his radio. His voice was shaking. "Viper 79er, Badger 3-1. I don't know how you just did that, but you saved our lives. We're clear, thank you." Naveen's response was characteristically brief. "Copy, Badger 3-1. Glad I could help. Viper 79er is off target, RTB." No flourish, no bravado, just the job done. That night, the Special Forces commander, a grizzled master sergeant named Ray Cordero, sat in his team room and wrote an email. It was addressed to the Air Force Chief of Staff, with copies to everyone in the chain of command. It was 3 paragraphs long. The first paragraph described the mission. The second described what Naveen had done. The third was a single sentence, "If Captain Kest."